Janet Cunningham with the University of Utah College of Humanities, and today I'm speaking with Jeff Metcalf, Director of Humanities in Focus and Professor of English. A documentary filmmaking course, Humanities in Focus is designed to help non-traditional adult learners acquire the skills to make documentary films. Jeff, let's just jump right in. Can you just explain a little bit about what Humanities in Focus is and how it got started?
It got started 13 years ago. I was involved with a program called the Venture Program. That was a program that offered 5 disciplines in the humanities to adult learners that had never had access to college. And what interested me most was the stories before and after the classes of what it was like to be a refugee, what it was like to be on the streets and be homeless. And I thought, these stories need to be told. And so I approached the class without much forethought to this and said, what would you think if we told your stories and made documentary films? And every hand went up. And I mentioned it to my wife, and she said, so how many films have you made? And I went, well, none, but I promised the doors would be open, and that was 13 years ago. And since then, we've made close to 80 documentary films, 15-minute length films, with a marriage between honor students and community members at large. The community members are interesting because I like to think of them as people with great dreams and limited means. They've never had access to higher education. So we completely fund the program and give them a full year worth of college studies in filmmaking, everything from taking the lens off the camera to interviewing techniques to editing to filming to adding music to it and making films. And then it culminates at the end of the year with a screening here on campus, on the university campus, where we have usually about 300 people come to see the documentaries. Half, I would say, are community members. That's how we got started. And we're continuing that work. We teach it both in English and Spanish, which is the only program in the Western United States that does that.
And how do students get involved in this program? If they're not matriculated at the U, how do they get involved and how do they apply?
Yeah, I hustle in the community. I mean, I go to restaurants, I go to the Heartland Center, University Neighborhood Partners to see if they have people interested. And what's happened over the years is that we end up getting more students that we can actually accommodate. I mean, the word's out on the street, and it's a beautiful thing. This is a program they can trust. They feel like they're respected here, that they have a voice, and that they can tell their stories without risk of being judged. Some of them are very, very personal stories. We did 2 last year, for example, on 2 DACA students. One, an honor student here at the University of Utah, who actually works for the Supreme Court, and the other one who runs, she's an engineer for the Jordan water system. Both of them remarkable, a young man and a young woman. And those are citizens that we want to tell their stories about.
What other types of stories have you covered through these documentaries? Because you said you've been doing it for 13 years, correct? So there's a ton of documentaries.
Absolutely. We've done documentaries, most recently, one on a woman who escaped from the FLDS community. It's called If This Is Heaven, Give Me Hell. And I think it's had over 600,000 hits on YouTube. We've done stories about what it's like to be homeless, what it's like to cross into this country as a young boy and see, the horrors of what it's like to travel with a coyote, about domestic violence. You pretty much name any of the social justice issues that are not, on the forefront of most documentary films, and we have made one. We did a wonderful documentary years ago about a young woman that wanted to be jumped out of a gang, and it's blood in and blood out. And so we followed that story, and she became one of the biggest advocates and social justice speakers for the Dreamers. I think she was on, the cover of Salt Lake Tribune more than our mayor was or our governor, and she is still a powerhouse.
So as students go through the process of making these documentaries on these incredibly sensitive topics, have you seen that maybe the documentaries have helped them maybe have a healing effect or help them work through some of these issues?
That's a great question. That's a great question, Jana. And I would say yes, without question. And the interesting thing is the night of our first screening here in the Marriott Library, there will always be 1 or 2 students who come up to me and say, I feel really I feel really uncomfortable about having my documentary shown. And I just tell them that you're going to have to trust us. And when it hits that larger audience, you're going to set people free. You're going to give them permission to talk about what it is your story's about. And invariably, they'll give me the nod. And then at the end of the documentary, they get a standing ovation. And then at our follow-up, people come up and talk to them and say, I'm so glad you talked about that because I've never been able to talk about it. Or, thank you, and I'm going to follow up on those resources you mentioned and highlighted in your documentary. So there's a real power once a documentary gets into the world. In many ways, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to that world. And we've had some of our documentaries that have been used with the DEA and social justice clinics and discussions all over the country. And that's pretty remarkable from a small program that started here 13 years ago, really in a closet.
Have any of your students gone on to continue to work in the areas of their documentary or the subjects of their documentary?
Yes, a number of them have, and also some of the students that have come through the program have graduated from the University of Utah here in filmmaking, and one of them is one of our adjunct faculty. So what we also do is we train the students that come through the program to teach other students, and our dream ultimately is to be able to raise enough funds to start these projects out in the community at the Horizonte Center for Cultural Arts, at Mestizo, down at Sorensen Unity Center. And that would be my dream, that we continue this conversation. A number of them started organizations. One wonderful woman that we had 10 years ago in the program who did a piece on domestic violence. And she actually got her husband to be interviewed, and then they started a counseling program that's still going, and I think it's 12 years old now. I mean, so it's the impetus for bigger movements, and I think that's one of the great surprises, that came out of that. Our hope is that we give them some skills. Some of them are working at KUED, some are working on the Spanish radio stations and television stations with these skills, and that's just a bonus to the program. They feel like their voices are heard, and they want to be heard.
That was Jeff Metcalf of Humanities in Focus. Visit humanities.utah.edu for more information about this program and other programs housed in the College of Humanities.